Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Before the program starts, I would like to kindly request for the honorable ministers of the first panel to please come and take your seats on the stage. For the panelists, for the esteemed panelists, if I can call them by the name. These are our panelists for the first panel. If I can please call them forward to the stage before we commence the program. The Honorable Minister, Dr. Owusu Akoto of Ghana. The Honorable Mrs. Joseph Asako, African Union Commission. Honorable Ali Njai. The Honorable Dr. Abu Karim.
We have two other ministers the minister from Malawi and from Rwanda and Cote d'Ivoire.
And the Honorable Minister from Norway, Anne Beth Tiverian. So kindly take your seats, and very soon the program will commence. Thank you very much. Wow.
Here, I just spoke to my boss. Okay. He said the ministers should sit here. Yeah. He will come up and speak and go back. Then he will come up and speak also. Royce will come up and speak and go back. Yeah. So just call it ministers, and she's in Madam Sako. So all done. Yeah. They will sit down there. Yeah. All the ministers here. The first panel. Just carry on.
No. Before the program starts, we would like to have our distinguished honorables on stage. If I can just call the names once again. The Honorable Josephina Sako on stage, thank you very much. The Honorable Dr. Owusu Akoto of Ghana. Honorable Ali Njai. Honorable Dr. Abu Karim. The Honorable from Norway, Anne Tervenerim. The Honorable Minister from Rwanda, Dr. Gerardine Mukushimana. And last but not least, our Honorable Minister from Cote d'Ivoire. If I can have all of these people on stage, and then we can commence our program. So we'd like to start with an opening video, so please take a look. If I can get the audio team, audio and tech, to begin the video, please. Thank you.
Every day in Africa, millions of women work hard to find what they need to feed.
Two, three, one, two, three. Okay, here we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. It is so nice to see you all. Is this one working? Okay, thank you. So I'll put this down. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Can I get some feedback? Good morning, good morning. Thank you. Good morning. It is so nice to have you all, so many beautiful faces joining us on a Saturday morning. And indeed, it is a very beautiful Saturday morning here in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. My name is Chika Odua. I am, in fact, a journalist. So normally in my day job, I am in the field. I don't look anything like this. I'm dirty in the field. I'm talking to the likes of Boko Haram insurgents. I'm talking to human traffickers. I'm talking to sea pirates. I'm talking to activists who are creating change in their communities. But every once in a while, I get to put on fancy clothes and attend such gatherings like this one. So it really is an honor to be here with you all. So welcome once again, distinguished members of the audience, honorables, ministers, members of the press, my colleagues. It is such an honor to have you all here. This program, I've actually been looking quite forward to it. I think this is one of the most anticipated programs, for me at least, here at COP27. This program is all about building resilience in Africa's food systems, especially the financing. The financing is key. We really have to get the financing right. So we're going to have two panels, distinguished panels, and they're going to explore how we can tap into some of the financing that is available for African systems to build resilience. So right now we have to ensure that African food systems can adapt to the very real realities of climate change and other shocks. I'm sure many of you are very well aware of these shocks. Some of these shocks include the war in Ukraine. Some of these shocks include inflation, the rising cost of borrowing money, the rising cost of living. We can all speak to these points. I'd like to share some of the interventions that the African Development Bank has put into place to respond to some of these shocks. And some of these were mentioned actually in the introduction video, but I'd like to highlight them once again. The African Development Bank has established the African Emergency Food Production Facility to assist millions of farmers all over the continent. The bank has a new mission. It's called Mission 1 for 200, and this will be launched next year in Dakar, Senegal, January of next year, as a matter of fact. But of course, climate change is the most pervasive threat to African food systems. We're very much aware of this. We have all seen how climate change has impacted our own communities, right, firsthand. I come from a fishing community in southern Nigeria. We do a lot of fishing and farming. And my entire hometown has been submerged underwater the past 2 months, as the River Niger has flooded my entire hometown. And just now, the waters are finally receding, just finally. So we all know the firsthand effects. You and I, we know what it means truly to bear the brunt of climate change. So throughout this program, it will last about 90 minutes or so. We'll try to keep it as quick as possible so you can enjoy the rest of your Saturday afternoon. We're going to talk a bit further about these issues. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Better? Okay. So even despite some of the bad news that we're hearing, we can all remain hopeful. This event is all about preferring solutions. So let's remain hopeful. This event, we want to engage and learn with one another. So at this time, it is my utmost honor to welcome His Excellency, President Dr. Adesina of the African Development Bank. I would like to invite him to enrich this prestigious gathering with opening statement. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, honorable ministers that are here. Thank you for honoring us. Commissioner, thank you for being here. the Vice President of IFAD, all the distinguished people that are here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, this is a very important meeting because we're talking about the issue of food. And I know people are talking about energy transitions, fuel, and all of that. If you have oil, you have gas. Nobody drinks oil and nobody smokes gas. Everybody eats food. So food is the most important issue to be talking about. When it comes to the case of Africa, Africa actually has 65% of all the arable land left to feed 9 billion people in the world. So what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. Now the point is, we are not optimizing that potential. We can say we have potential. My friend Roy Stanner here, we've been doing this for a long time. But there's no market for potential. Nobody eats potential. We have to unlock that particular potential. When there was the war in Ukraine, it was not very difficult for me as president of the bank to see that our continent was dependent on Ukraine and Russia for 30 million metric tons of wheat and maize. And so something happened in Ukraine, and then Africa is almost at a risk of a food crisis. And that's why the African Development Bank very quickly launched the Africa Emergency Food Production Facility. What exactly is it that it is doing? It is supporting 20 million farmers to have access to climate-resilient technologies to produce 38 million metric tons of food. That is 8 million metric tons of food than actually Africa loses from its import from Ukraine and Russia. And that value of food is worth roughly $12 billion. I want to thank all the partners that have been supporting us on that. Norway has been a great supporter. Minister Ann-Beth and I talk quite a lot. In fact, she doubled even her contribution towards that facility. You can give it up to her. She's a great champion for agriculture in Africa. Japan put up significant amount of money for us. The United States supported us on fertilizers. We also have Netherlands and others that are supporting us. But that is on the emergency side. Africa needs to unlock fully its potential. And for that, it needs technologies. And what you saw on one of those videos is the power of technologies. We have this platform that's called Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, or TAAT. Quickly, it has so far provided for farmers in Africa, 12 million farmers, climate-resilient technologies for wheat, for rice, for maize, all across the countries. But what's most important and most dramatic is what has happened to wheat in Africa. Everybody that knows wheat knows that wheat is a temperate crop. But we've been able to develop and support the development of heat-tolerant wheat varieties. That's wheat that does well under hot environments for Africa. Our environment is hot. And it is producing incredible results. In Ethiopia, we provided them through TAT, which you saw, access to seeds for these varieties. In 2018, they cultivated 5,000 hectares. In 2022, they are cultivating 650,000 hectares. So in 3 years, Ethiopia became totally self-sufficient in wheat for the first time in their history. And next year, they will become a net exporter, exporting to Kenya and to Djibouti, and why not to the rest of Africa. Sudan, anybody here from Sudan? Yeah, in Sudan, we gave those same heat-tolerant varieties to Sudan. They cultivated them in Sudan on over 387,000 hectares. They reduced their wheat import 50% in 3 years. So I know that the technologies exist to feed Africa. I know the platforms to do so is there with TAT to do it at scale. I know the policy support is there to be able to support Africa to do this. But it's not just about crops. It's not just about food. It's how you process the food, how you make sure you add value to the food. And for that, you need to develop new zones. We're developing now what we call special agro-industrial processing zones in Africa, where we put infrastructure in the rural areas, close to where the farmers are, so they can buy the crops from the farmers. They can process the milk. They can develop value chains locally, regionally, and competitively. I would like to thank our partners for that. The International Fund for Agricultural Development that is co-financing with us, along with the Islamic Development Bank. We just did something in Nigeria for about $532 million. You were there in Nigeria. And you, IFAD and Islamic Development Bank did about $320 million in support of that. So thank you very much for that. But we should do that everywhere in Africa. That is absolutely fundamental for Africa. But then, we are talking climate change. How do we insure our farmers? You know, an American farmer, a European farmer, and I went with Minister Anbert in Norway. I saw farmers in Norway. They're more, you know, they have so much technologies. But an African farmer, when he wakes up in the morning, he has to pray, God, be with me as I go to my farm. You go to that farm, God, I pray there's rain, and God, I pray. You know, I like prayers. But I think we must do the right thing and protect our farmers against the shocks. Europe has it. America has it. Asia has it. We must have facilities that protect them in case there are damages. And that's why we launched what's called the Africa Disaster Risk Insurance Facility. That is insuring countries against catastrophic risk events. And we must get more money. And I want to thank you, Minister Anbert, again for your support towards that facility. Because of that support, we were able to get premiums paid for countries who cannot afford those premiums and have payouts of about $125 million to farmers because of drought or floods or cyclones. To wrap this up, I want to say this. I do not believe that Africa should go anywhere with cap in hand begging for food. No. Africa should produce the food. The low bar, as far as I'm concerned, is for Africa to feed itself. The high bar is for Africa to feed the world. And that's what we must be doing. And to get there, we must have zero hunger in Africa. And that's why we are now planning what is called a Feed Africa Summit in Dakar. That will be 25th to 27th of January. Please do mark your calendars. That we will be doing together with Minister of Norway, with IFAD, with FAO, with World Food Program, with Rockefeller Foundation, Gates Foundation, and all the other players, USAID and everybody else. And it is not another summit. Let me be clear. Not just another summit. If we can do in 3 years, get Sudan, Ethiopia to become self-sufficient, I believe we can make many countries self-sufficient in food in less than 5 years in Africa. And therefore, what we'll be doing in Dakar is what we call Food and Agricultural Delivery Compact. It is a compact that is going to be put under the heads of state. Here is what you need to get to zero hunger in Africa. Seeds and fertilizers, irrigation, financing, infrastructure, and the policy environment. And all of us signed that. It's a compact we owe the people. Development must be done with pride. You cannot develop with pride when you are begging for food. And therefore, we want to make sure that is put under the heads of state, that will have a high-level delivery council over it. Africa must feed itself. Africa must save itself from spending $75 billion a year importing food that it should be exporting. It's time for us to rise together. I am very, very confident that we can do that. I've been around this block for quite some time. Roy, you and I have been here for a long time. I can tell you, I've been Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria for 4 years as well. In all of my professional career, I've never been this enthused, convinced that Africa can feed itself, and this is the time to do it. And after doing it, then everybody must be looking to us, not as a place to be fed, but as a place that feeds the rest of the world. So let's do it. Thank you very much.
That was excellent. Perhaps my biggest takeaway from that remarkable address, sir, we cannot eat potential. We cannot put it on our plates and eat it. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to call on Dr. Roy Steiner of the Rockefeller Foundation to give another set of remarks before we commence our panel. Thank you so much.
Honorable ministers, it's a real pleasure to be here, and of course to be following Keen. It's always hard because he brings such enthusiasm and such vision to this space. He's really said most of what I wanted to say, so I'll just reinforce 4 specific things. One is Africa can feed itself, as Akin said, and that vision is absolutely critical. If you can't imagine it, you can't create it. And I think we have to believe it and move in that direction. Secondly, as Akin said, this takes partnership. It's not going to happen by one entity. Humanity has always progressed when we collaborate, and we have always gone backwards when we fight and when we polarize. And unfortunately, we have these 2 forces in the world right now. There's the forces of disintegration, and we can see them everywhere, but there's also the force of integration, and we need to continue fostering those forces of integration. The third is innovation, and I'm so proud and you know, I want to compliment the African Development Bank for the incredible science and innovation it's been bringing to the table. We need more of that, and we need to bring the latest. You know, one of the things I'm most excited by is the power of renewable energy. Combining that with agriculture, we can bring power and irrigation and mechanization into Africa in a way we've never been able to do before. And that potential has never before existed as it does now because of the mini grids and solar and irrigation that's there. We also are understanding ways to bring organic and biological fertility into soil systems. So you don't have to depend so much on some of the outside fertilizer. We still need that, but using organic waste and soil microbial activity to really transform the system. And then fourth, I'll end here, is I think we need the power of love. Ben Okri, a beautiful Nigerian poet, talked about love in the sense of not this wishy-washy feeling, but the love of nature, the love of future generations, and the love of our fellow humanity. It's only when we can really go deep down and express that love that we can create the transformation we want. So thank you, honorable ministers, and thank you, Dr. Adesina.
Thank you very much for that very powerful remark. I like the notes, the Ode to Love, and Ben Okri, one of my favorite writers. Thank you so much for mentioning him. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the first of the 2 distinguished panels. This panel is all about success stories. We want to hear about successful policy interventions that have made some impact in trying to boost resilience on the ground. So we have before you a distinguished array of speakers. I'd like to call them one by one. We have the Honorable Mrs. Josepha Sacco, Commissioner of Agriculture and Rural Development of the African Union Commission. Thank you so much for joining us. We have the Honorable Dr. Owusu Afriye Akoto from Ghana, Minister of Food and Agriculture. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. We have Honorable Ali Ndiaye from Senegal, the Minister of Agriculture. We also have the Minister of Agriculture for Sierra Leone, Dr. Abu Karim. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's a pleasure. We also have the Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources from Rwanda, Dr. Gerardine Mukushimana. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to invite the Minister from Côte d'Ivoire, if you can just please step forward and take your seat so you can join us. If I can invite the Minister of Agriculture for Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we also have the Minister of International Development of Norway, the Honorable Anne Beath Tivenerim. Round of applause, please, a round of applause. You know, these days, when you turn on the news, look at the news highlights, a lot of the news that we see is very gloomy. It's all about doom. It's quite depressing. But at this time, we actually want to focus on some success stories. We want to highlight positivity. So I would like to ask each of our speakers to talk about an intervention that they were a part of, something that they were able to see on ground that made some positive impact in their countries. Specifically speaking about policies that led to scaling technologies in your country or was supported by the organization in which you represent. If I can please start with the Honorable Sacco, please.
Thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor. Good morning. I think we're still good morning, every one of you. I would like to recognize or acknowledge Dr. Akin Adesina, the president of African Development Bank, my dear brother, honorable ministers on the panel, honorable ministers on the other side. It was off. Yeah, sorry. Apologies for technology. It was not on. So let me also recognize the distinguished participants here, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol duly observed. I would first of all like to thank the African Development Bank for inviting me to participate in this ministerial panel on successful policy intervention for scaling technology. We are here, COP27, and we say it's a COP of action. It's not a COP of meetings. That is why I have the pleasure to share with you what we are doing in African Union. What is our mandate about the transformation of agriculture in the African Union? I'm the Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, Sustainable Environment. So I would like to share, because today is the day of agriculture here in this COP27, so I would like to share what we are doing, what is our relevance. We know that we have a flagship program, which is CADEP Malabo, endorsed by our head of state to transform agriculture. So it is on that I'm going to really showcase, because we are here to showcase. We are not here for just conversation. This conversation here is what do you do, and what are the challenges, and how do you go forward? And we know that agriculture is a rain-fed, structure. So that is why it's important that our ministers of agriculture are part of this COP, because it is the sector, the most affected sector on our continent. It is the most affected sector by the impact of climate change. That is why we need really a strong, sustainable, resilient food system. And last year, the Secretary General of the UN called for, we organized our food system summit in parallel, in the margin of the UNGA in New York. So that is why we really need to speed up all this we are doing from one edition to another. COP27 should be accountable for what we do for one COP to another. Otherwise, we go to COP 1000, 2000, and we haven't done anything. We are just doing tourism. With this, let me try to share the experience that we are doing in African Union. So COP27 is taking place at a crucial time when the global food prices are surging, induced by multiple shocks or factors such as climate change, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the COVID-19 pandemic, and all these diseases and insects that we went through in the Horn of Africa, like the cricket, desert cricket, and the fall armyworm. So all these, are really eating the poorest countries on our continent. That is why this year, just on the 10th of October 2022, we convened a high-level conference together with IFRC, FAO, and the African Development Bank to find solution of the lingering problem of this food crisis. Until 2025, Africa is implementing the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, which is our flagship program, of the Agenda 2063, the Malabo Declaration, that was adopted by African Union in 2014 with 7 commitments that if we fulfill it, if we really comply, if we implement it, it will build resilient food system on the continent. The 3rd edition of CADEP, Biannual Review Report, was presented this year in February 2022 during the Assembly of Heads of State. And that biannual review report indicates that only one country is on track to meet the Malabo target by 2025. 2025 is the 10 years action plan that we have. It's just 3 years ahead of us. And this country, I commend my dear sister, Minister of Agriculture of Rwanda. The 3 editions we submitted, Rwanda is always the first. But the good news also is that out of these 49 countries that reported for this report, for the third edition, 28 countries are on track. The benchmark was a little bit high, it was 7, but most of the countries, the 28, their score was above 5, which is really encouraging, which is saying that we are working, our ministers are working, our member states are working. Really, it's encouraging to go through accountability. Mutual accountability is the commitment number 7 of CADEP, Malabo flagship program. So I'm really happy that our ministers are here and they have really good lesson to learn from one another. But we ask Rwanda to tell us the secret, because for the 3 editions, they're always first. They're receiving a prime from doing well on CADEP Malabo flagship program. So let me now try to bring out what is our priority after these reports that we came from the CADEP Malabo Declaration. So our priority report, our first priority is, in order to speed up implementation of CADEP, and in response to the recent shocks for Lami-worm, desert locust on the Horn of Africa, COVID-19 pandemic, Russia and Ukraine conflict, climate change conflict, we decided to concentrate in Eastern and Southern Africa, of the African, so that they can also domesticate their own national investment plan to the CADEP principle, to align it so that we can start monitoring them and seeing that they're really doing some progress. This is the recommendation of the 3rd biannual review report, that we need to domesticate more countries to align their national policies with the continental policy. The second one is the pathway to the African common position to the UN food system. This is our priority, because last year the region, Africa, was the only region that presented a common position, and it was consultative. The ministers are here, they will also share, because each country, they did the national dialogues, with all the stakeholders to find out what are really the challenges, what are the hotspots to bring in this important document. We are not here to invent the wheel exists, and this document was approved by our head of state. So we need to really implement our common position, that we did it with the REX, with NEPAD, with ADB. All of us, we came and we brought, and we presented it during the Food System Summit in New York. So the 3rd priority, it is the priority of African Union CADEP Business Plan 2022-2025. It is all aligned on all this initiative, both that the Egyptian government is presenting on the COP27, and with our theme of the year, which is nutrition, resilient nutrition. We made a lot of focus. We have 47 game changing in this common position. So everything we are saying is already endorsed in an African common position that we presented. This is, our roadmap, so that we go to implementation. So we are very happy. We are very happy that the bank, African Development Bank, is with us, working with us, because immediately after the Russia and the Ukrainian crisis, the African Development Bank joined force with the African Union and the President of the African Union, President Macky Sall, to find solution. And they came out with a very good initiative, which is the initiative of African Emergency Food Production Facility, with an amount of $1.5 billion. We know it's not enough, for the entire continent, but for this sector that is so vulnerable, for our poor farmer, it will make a difference. And this is a very good initiative because we want to produce our own seed. We want to go food sovereignty. We want to have our own food reserve because COVID-19 pandemic lesson learned is that we cannot depend on international market. We need to have our own, and we believe this initiative, this facility will really help Africa to produce its cereals because we have 4 commodities here. It is wheat, it is maize, and soybeans and rice. And we know that Ethiopia is doing, like President Adesina said it rightly, is already producing wheat. And next year, Ethiopia is going to export. So we are going to reinforce the inter-African trade under our FCC, the ASALECAS. So this is very important for us to say that we are working. In a short and medium term, the African Union aims at five key objectives. Increase food production on the continent by focusing on seed sector development, fertilizer and soil health, water management, appropriate mechanization, and land tenure. Talking of fertilizer, next year we have the Fertilizer Summit in Dakar, the Fertilizer Summit and Soil Health Summit in Dakar, so that we can see how we can produce our own fertilizer on the continent. The second one is to reduce post-harvest loss by focusing on storage facility and technology and cold storage chain. The third is boost inter-African trade in food and agricultural products with a focus on animal health, plant health, and food safety. The fourth one is increasing investment in climate-smart agriculture, focusing on agricultural research and development, and agriculture extension and advisory services. The fifth is strengthening accountability for action and result with a focus on the utilization of the funding from the CADEP biannual review report on regional and national dialogue to inform action, also support cross-countries learning and sharing the best practices in agricultural transformation. To boost inclusivity, women and youth will be mainstream in all these our priority. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Asante sana. Thank you very much. Muito obrigada. Muitas gracias. Shukran.
Thank you. Minister, you forgot my language. Dalu, Dalu in Igbo. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. We need to add Igbo to that as well. Thank you so much for that rousing address. For the sake of time, I know that the minister from Rwanda has another meeting, so if I can call her forward, please. And if I can just deliver a charge for the ministers, if you can just hone in on one successful strategy. Tell us a story. Also, if you can talk about the hindrances that may be preventing your country from really fast-tracking the road to resilience and how partnerships can be able to manage those hindrances better. So just one very quick story that can really excite us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think that's a tough work to, when we speak of food, when you are told to say just one item, I think it's really difficult. But I think when we are speaking of agriculture and everything, we should be asking ourselves, all of this for what? And once we bring it to the finality of it, which is the human lives, it makes a lot of sense. So we can do millions of things from irrigation, seed, but if it doesn't get to the table and people live out of it, I mean, there is nothing that you have done. But probably I wouldn't go into specificities, but I think my colleagues will be saying it. The pieces of everything is there, but how do you scale them up to have an impact to change lives? That's where I see the challenge. So if we could mobilize the room and the panels to make sure that all of these initiatives that are around are scaled up, that's when we reach the impact and we feed ourselves, that Mr. President has mentioned. Otherwise, I think countries are not lacking policies. They are not lacking pieces of implementation on each value chain. But how do you scale them and have impact on lives? That's where the challenge is. So there are many policies that we are implementing, all the way from irrigation to agriculture, insurance to nutrition. But again, what I want to say is that also scaling up, it comes with the farmers, the citizens, the private sector, the civil society to reach. So most of the successful policies that we are implementing in Rwanda are those that are having a coalition of all of these players to be able to deliver. So that's what I can say. Otherwise, I cannot go through all of these policies and pick just one. Thank you.
So at this time, I would like to have a more engaging panel format. So we have the two microphones here for our panelists to share. I'd like to first ask for the Honorable Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, if you can just please talk about the most successful intervention in the sector of agriculture and building resilience, the one intervention that you're most proud of, so to speak, if you can just share that with us. Sorry, so we're going to ask if you can just stay seated and just so we can have a dynamic panel. Thank you very much, sir.
Merci. Je voudrais saluer l'intervention du président Avesina, que nous connaissons bien, pour son engagement aux côtés de nos États dans le cadre du développement de nos agricultures. Et moi qui vous parle, je suis un témoin privilégié de ce que son institution fait pour notre pays dans le cadre de la mise en place de nos agropoles. L'agropole du Bélier, financé en partie par la BAD, et aujourd'hui l'agropole Nord, puisque nous avons compris qu'aujourd'hui nous devons produire davantage pour nos différents pays. Et le président a bien raison de dire que nous ne mangeons pas le pétrole, nous ne consommons pas le gaz. Ce que nous consommons, c'est la nourriture. Mais il se trouve que les gens ne s'en souviennent que lorsqu'ils ont faim. La priorité, c'est vrai, c'est la santé. La priorité, c'est vrai, c'est l'école. Mais lorsque vous êtes malade, que vous allez à l'hôpital, qu'on vous prescrit des médicaments, la première des choses, c'est de dire le matin, avant de prendre votre comprimé, vous le faites avant de manger, au petit déjeuner. Au déjeuner, vous prenez un comprimé. Et au dîner également, vous en prenez un. Cela veut dire que la nourriture gouverne le monde. Malheureusement, nous avons tendance à ne pas lui accorder une grande importance. C'est pour cela que dans le cadre de ces séances de travail, nous devons mettre l'accent sur le financement de nos agricultures qui est une priorité. L'école est une priorité, mais l'enfant qui va à l'école, qui ne trouve rien à manger, connaît beaucoup de difficultés. Donc nous devons également produire pour que les enfants qui vont à l'école puissent trouver de quoi manger. Parce que quand vous ne pouvez pas manger, on dit vous êtes malade. Dès que vous commencez à manger, on dit vous êtes guéri. Donc la nourriture, c'est le premier médicament de l'homme. C'est pour cela qu'aujourd'hui, nous devons nous accorder à trouver la solution à nos problèmes avec les catastrophes diverses constatées ça et là. En ce qui concerne par exemple les sécheresses, il y a aussi les inondations partout. Le monde est fait de perpétuels contrastes. Au moment où ailleurs on parle de sécheresse, dans d'autres pays on parle d'inondation. Qu'est-ce que nous devons faire? Trouver des moyens pour faire des irrigations, pour produire. En Côte d'Ivoire, par exemple, nous sommes le premier pays producteur de cacao, avec 2 200 000 tonnes. Mais nous exportons ce que nous produisons et nous importons ce que nous consommons. Ce n'est pas normal. Quand vous prenez la noix de cajou, nous en sommes premiers producteurs, mais nous exportons la totalité de ce que nous-mêmes nous produisons. Et en ce qui concerne ce que nous consommons, nous sommes des importateurs. Il faut renverser la tendance. C'est pour cela, dans le cadre de cette crise avec l'Ukraine et la Russie, nous avons compris qu'il faut une adaptation de nos agricultures qui tiennent compte de nos réalités, produire localement, assurer notre souveraineté alimentaire. Et je crois que je suis d'avis avec le président de la BAD lorsqu'il nous demande désormais de nous tourner vers nos propres productions. Nous avons compris avec la crise en Ukraine que le manioc intervient dans la confection du pain. Et nous sommes en train de produire du manioc pour en faire de la farine qui va contribuer à la fabrication du pain. Nous avons compris qu'avec le maïs, nous pouvons avoir de la farine qui peut également contribuer à la confection de pain. Et les exemples sont nombreux. Il faut qu'aujourd'hui l'Afrique tienne compte de ses potentialités parce que nous avons la chance d'avoir des rivières, des fleuves, des lacs, des barrages, des bas-fonds partout. Mais pourquoi ne pouvons-nous pas nous-mêmes produire notre propre consommation? Pourquoi avons-nous besoin de faire venir du riz d'ailleurs alors que nous avons des terres riches pour produire du riz? Et je crois qu'aujourd'hui, nous avons besoin d'être financés. Le véritable problème, c'est le financement. Il faut que les gens comprennent que l'agriculture mérite d'être financée. Et donc, nous conformer aux exigences de Malabo, qui demandent que 10% de nos budgets soient vraiment investis dans l'agriculture. Et comme Monsieur le Président est là, je viens de voir mon frère de la Banque mondiale pour également les interventions au niveau de nos différents pays, parce que la Banque mondiale aujourd'hui est en train de nous soutenir dans notre politique de production vivrière, et je voudrais donc la saluer. Je voudrais saluer la BAD qui également intervient pour nous. Je crois que le temps d'un panel ne nous permet pas d'entrer en profondeur des choses, mais ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que nous devons être désormais souverains au niveau de nos pays dans le cadre donc de la lutte contre l'insécurité alimentaire. Et la meilleure façon de le faire, c'est de trouver des financements. Merci donc d'être avec nous dans le cadre de ce financement. Et je crois que si vous le faites, nos pays ne peuvent que s'en trouver heureux. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. We all know that cocoa and cashews are very important to the economy of your country, and we want to make sure that that stays. Thank you for those comments. I'd now like to turn to Ghana, because Ghana has made some headway in providing more access for farmers to reach fertilizers and seeds. So if we can ask the Honorable Minister, if you can speak more to this point, access for farmers to get better yields of crops, fertilizers, and seeds, please. If you can just share a success story. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The success story of Ghana begins with some statistics. In terms of the growth rate of the sector in the last 3 years. In 2019, agricultural sector grew by 4.5% in Ghana. 2020, in the eye of the storm of the COVID, agricultural sector grew by 7.4%. And last year, 2021, that growth went up to 8.4%, the highest in about 30 years. So with all the global disturbances and so on, the agricultural sector in Ghana has performed very well, to the extent that from only 18% of Ghana's GDP, because the agricultural sector has grown far higher than the other sectors, the share of agriculture in the economy of Ghana has picked up from 18% to 22% last year. And we expect this to be maintained this year. How did this come about? It comes about through policy. That from 2017, when the government of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo came into office, we adopted what we call Planting for Food and Jobs, which is a label for all the policies that the government has been pursuing. And it's based on targeting smallholder agriculture, because smallholder agriculture in Ghana still produces over 85% of agricultural output. And why the target was that the productivity of this sector, one of the lowest in West Africa, I would say one of the lowest in the world. In terms of yields per hectare, all across the board. I mean, we're talking about food crops, tree crops, the yields were very low. So we decided that we would target a smallholder agriculture with seed, improved seed and fertilizer. And we've succeeded in doing that. 8 kilograms per hectare was the application of fertilizer in 2016. We've managed to bring it up to 25 kilograms per hectare as of last year, which is still only half the ECOWAS heads of state target of 50 kilograms per hectare compared to the world average of 130 kilograms. But we are making progress from 8 kilograms per hectare to 25 kilograms per hectare in 5 years. Is quite commendable. When it comes to seed, it's even better. We were able to distribute 4,400 metric tons of improved seed of grains in 2017. Last year, we reached nearly 40,000 metric tons of improved seed to smallholder agriculture. So you can see that we are changing the technology in the smallholder farmer, and it's showing in the yields of maize, rice, soya, and the other basic crops have been going up so substantially in that period, which means that we are now producing a surplus. In fact, the government of Ghana has had to put a bar on how much of the grains can be shipped out across our borders to our neighbors, because otherwise our livestock sector was in danger. And that shows you we're getting trucks all the way from Kano in Nigeria, from Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, coming into Ghana to pick the surpluses. But we want to control that because we need to take care of our livestock industry. So that's the kind of success that we have. Nestling in this is the African Development Bank project, which is SAPIP in the northern sector, where we are encouraging small, medium-sized farmers to turn into commercial farmers. So this facility, this intervention has worked very, very well. It was a pilot with $35 million US from the African Development Bank. Now the pilot is over. It's been a runaway success. We've gone back and we are trying to get more financing from the African Development Bank. And I see that the president is here, and I want to use this platform to ensure that additional resources are made available to us.
Thank you so much. If I can just piggyback off of what you mentioned, you talked about yield going up. Food prices are also going up. And according to the World Bank, Ghana now has the highest food prices in sub-Saharan Africa. What kind of interventions would you like to see from the international community to help you to mitigate this very real reality?
We don't need international community.
Okay.
In fact, just as I left Accra three days ago to come here, we started a policy. See, you go to the producing areas, there's abundance of food, prices are low. When you come to the urban areas, that's where the problem is. And we calculate that the food prices in the producing areas is only 1/3 the food prices in the big towns like Accra, Kumasi, and so on. So we are tackling the problem. Somebody is making supernormal profits. Because if you allow for transport in spite of the fuel price increases and everything, you find that, for instance, a tuber of yam should be selling at 7-8 Ghana cedis in Accra. And yet it's selling for 30 cedis. Obviously, there's something funny going on. So we have arranged for trucks to go to the producing areas using the same traders to bring these products into Accra. In fact, yesterday night on the premises of the ministry, we were retailing plantain for 1/3 the price that they get in the local market. And the place was swarmed with people who want to take advantage. It's only a pilot, it's succeeding. We are going to make sure that we extend this throughout the country so that we can link the producing area directly to the retailer in the big towns.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister from Sierra Leone. Can you top this success story from Ghana?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
His Excellency, President Adesina, thanks very much for this wonderful gathering that you've put together. And I want to also appreciate the donors, particularly for the support they're giving us. In line to the question that you actually posed to us, for us, as a country, what we did, immediately we took over, through His Excellency the President, was also develop what we refer to as a policy shift, and really moving away from the traditional way of doing agriculture. And what that meant was that we decided to take mechanization as one of the key components to help. Just to give you a small statistics, Sierra Leone has about 5.3 million hectares of arable land, of which less than 15% have been utilized. And those days have gone where we have to depend on hoes and cutlasses. And therefore, the only way we could do that was really to put more lowland under cultivation. And we cannot do that if we depend on manual labor. Therefore, His Excellency took the bold step for us to procure machines and distributed that into all the 15 agricultural districts in the form of machinery, bringing in the private sector to actually manage them on a public-private partnership with the government. What that meant was that the focus is really bringing in the private sector, and for that, a credit facility was also provided to help them because we had a very weak private sector. And what that meant was that there was availability or at least access to some level of financing at single-digit interest rate, which is where the challenge is. Because access to finance is really very key, and that has been one of the biggest hurdles for our farmers in order to be able to leverage on it. What that meant was that as at 2020, at the height of COVID, when we started it initially, there was an increase in rice production of about 12%. By 2021, we had an increase of about 24.7%, which shows that, and that meant as of 2019, it's about 500,000 odd metric ton produced. As of 2021, it's about 912,000 metric ton. So what that shows is that if we're able to put more lowland under cultivation and have the requisite financing to support the private sector, we'll be able to actually improve on our productivity. So the case really for us is more financing, green financing to support agricultural productivity, and really investment in irrigation, because we have one of the best ecologies, about 4 key ecologies, which President Adesina is no stranger to in Sierra Leone because he did part of his studies there. We have the Boliland riverine area, mangroves and the inland valley swamps. So we have what it takes. But without irrigation, it's going to be really difficult, because with irrigation we can produce 2-3 times a year. So 2 things for me as a take home here is that focus on green financing to support things like irrigation, and also bring in private sector. One of the other things that we did was actually to bring in innovation, but that's really very key. And for the first time, we've actually established few platforms, the e-voucher platform, through which farmers can now access their inputs through a subsidy program. And also, we've also developed an agricultural market information system, plus an advisory system through which farmers can actually access information in their local languages on the various agricultural practices.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was amazing. So we're hearing that Ghana has increased yield. That's excellent. We've also heard Sierra Leone increase mechanization of farming. Now let's go to Senegal to hear some of the success stories. Sir, if you can enlighten us with some of the positivity happening in your sector in Senegal. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
So you can take your seat. I think it's okay.
I think that what I have to say, I would say it when I'm...
Excellent. No problem.
When I'm standing. Mr. President, good morning. Good morning to all the distinguished ministers here and distinguished guests. I would like to speak in English, but I'm going to do it in French, because in French, I will tell you what I really feel. And I can tell you that I'm going to change the speech I wanted to say when I came here, because what you have said is going to change what I'm going to say. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. J'ai été très touché par votre discours, parce que vous avez un discours qui a été très agressif. Et c'est bien, parce que vous avez compris, peut-être moi, ce que j'avais déjà. Je me rappelle bien quand j'étais jeune banquier, il y a à peu près 20 ans, quand je venais dans une banque qui finançait l'habitat, j'ai dit il faut qu'on change, parce que le besoin il est là. Et j'ai compris très tôt que la banque ne fait de l'argent que quand elle finance. Donc il faut que les banques soient moins conservatrices. Ce que vous avez dit tout à l'heure, ça montre votre engagement à accompagner l'agriculture. Vous avez accompagné le Sénégal comme beaucoup d'autres pays depuis que vous êtes à la tête de cette institution. Mais cet engagement que vous avez pris me réconforte. Et je vais y aller droit au but. D'abord, Dakar 2 aura lieu en janvier. Nous en profiterons pour inviter tous nos collègues ministres de l'Agriculture, parce que certainement, à l'issue de cette rencontre, des décisions importantes seront prises pour des investissements dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Monsieur le Président, depuis 2012, le président Macky Sall, à la tête du Sénégal, a fait beaucoup d'innovations dans le domaine de l'agriculture. Premièrement, lorsqu'il venait d'arriver, le ministère de l'Agriculture s'appelait tout simplement ministère de l'Agriculture. Il a compris très tôt qu'on ne peut pas développer l'agriculture si nous n'avons pas de la mécanisation. En 2012, il a changé le titre pour l'appeler ministère de l'Agriculture et de l'Équipement rural. En 10 ans, nous avons eu plus de 1600 tracteurs subventionnés très fortement, des fois même à 60% et mis à la disposition des agriculteurs, des moissonneuses et toutes sortes de matériel qui nous a permis de plus que doubler pratiquement toutes les productions, notamment de céréales. Il y a 2 mois, j'ai été nommé ministre de l'Agriculture, de l'Équipement rural et de la souveraineté alimentaire. Cela veut dire qu'il a également compris que nous devons prendre encore davantage notre destinée en main pour atteindre ces objectifs dont vous avez parlé tout à l'heure. Cela ne doit pas être difficile de réaliser ces autosuffisances dont vous avez parlé, notamment dans le domaine des céréales. Nous avons déjà fait des preuves et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, ce qu'il nous manque, c'est l'accompagnement sur le plan financier. Monsieur le Président, je vous donne quelques cas concrets. Au Sénégal, nous attendons cette année près de 1,4 million tonnes de riz paddy. Cette année. C'est pratiquement l'équivalent de ce que nous avons importé. Pourtant, au Sénégal, d'abord, la science a permis à nos chercheurs de développer d'abord des variétés de riz aujourd'hui qui s'adaptent. Dans le milieu où il ne pleut pas beaucoup, le riz pluvial est devenu 60% de notre production de riz au Sénégal. Le riz irrigué, qui constitue les 40%, malgré notre très grand avantage parce que nous avons plus de 300 000 hectares qu'on peut aménager et pour lesquels nous n'avons aménagé qu'à peine un tiers. Nous avons également développé des variétés de riz, non seulement qui s'adaptent à peu de pluie, mais qui également, aujourd'hui, ont prouvé de très bons rendements allant de 10 à 12 tonnes l'hectare. Ça veut dire que le riz, pour lequel nous sommes à 1,4 million 500 000 tonnes de production, nous pouvons, dans les 2 ans, voire 3 ans à venir, être autosuffisants en riz. Monsieur le Président, je parle du maïs. Au Sénégal, cette année, nous allons produire 800 000 tonnes de maïs. Nous avons importé près de 300 000 tonnes de maïs. Importé. Et tout le monde sait le rôle du maïs aujourd'hui, ne serait-ce que d'abord pour l'aliment, ensuite pour l'aliment de bétail. Nous avons la possibilité au Sénégal, rien que pour le prochain hivernage, avec 60 000 hectares de plus aménagés, d'être autosuffisants en maïs. C'est juste des investissements que ça demande sur le plan de la mécanisation, sur le plan de la fertilisation. Ce n'est pas compliqué, on peut l'atteindre. Monsieur le Président, quand vous serez au Sénégal, Dakar 2, quand vous serez au Sénégal, Dakar 2, nous aimerions bien que vous visitez un champ expérimental de blé. Parce que le président m'a chargé d'en faire. Parce que cette année, nous avons importé 600 000 tonnes de blé. Parce que les Sénégalais aujourd'hui, comme beaucoup d'Africains, ne peuvent plus se passer du pain avec du blé. J'ai pris la décision de dire, Monsieur le Président, moi je vais faire, certes, le champ expérimental, mais j'ai amené le directeur de l'ISRA dans cette mission pour qu'on retourne au Sénégal avec des semences de blé parce que nous avons des candidats, nous avons de la terre, nous avons, comment dirais-je, la possibilité d'avoir au moins pour cette première année 500 hectares que nous voulons essayer pour le blé. Nous avons pris des décisions fortes pour répondre. Aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce qu'il nous faut? Vous avez dit tout à l'heure, nous sommes tous d'accord. On a un fort potentiel, mais nous avons besoin de financement. Si nous sommes accompagnés dans les financements pour les aménagements, je ne parle même pas, moi, d'importation d'engrais, parce que nous avons suffisamment de phosphate au Sénégal et bientôt nous aurons du gaz pour pouvoir faire de l'urée et faire l'engrais dont nous avons besoin. Donc, nous pouvons aujourd'hui, pour ces spéculations que nous choisirons, que ce soit le riz, que ce soit le maïs, que ce soit le blé, que ce soit le manioc dont le ministre de la Côte d'Ivoire a parlé tout à l'heure, produire suffisamment pour nous nourrir, voire même exporter. Nous devons changer la donne et faire de sorte que nos pays, avec ce potentiel que nous connaissons, exportent au lieu d'importer. Je vous remercie.
Thank you for that arousing presentation. So rice and maize production is on the rise in Senegal. Last but not least, I'd like to ask our delegate from Norway to talk about how your organization is helping African farmers. If you can mention the one intervention that you're most proud of. Thank you.
I will deliver on your request, moderator. First of all, it's such an honor to sit here in this panel with distinguished ministers of agriculture, and not only is it an honor, it's fun. And with Commissioner Sacco and the president of the African Development Bank, we've had many good discussions on agriculture, and this is really a panel for nerds, and I like that. I'm going to give you one example of many, but it illustrates very well how I think we need to approach this challenge of food sovereignty in Africa bottom up. I visited Malawi a few months ago together with the president of IFAD, actually, the then president, Mr. Hongbo. And the Norwegian Investment Fund for Development, Norfund, has invested in the Lilongwe dairy. Malawi used to import almost all its dairy products from South Africa and other countries. Hardly any production local whatsoever. With investments, the Lilongwe dairy have taken over almost the whole market share for dairy production in Malawi, creating thousands of jobs. But not only that, they have given 10,000 dairy farmers with an average of 1 cow a secure minimum income, a secure a minimum price for delivering their milk, which has really set the wheels moving. And I was absolutely, I was so inspired to see what they had achieved and the security that it gave those dairy farmers to invest and scale up their production. But I'm going to give you an example of where the dots weren't connected, because Mr. Hongbo and I also visited another community just down the road, about an hour from Lilongwe. They had a road. They had received extension services to scale up their production. They were very happy about that. But they were not able to deliver to Lilongwe Dairy because they did not have the cold chains. They needed that generator. And that's, you know, yesterday we had a panel in this very same spot, and President Adesina was talking about the baobab tree, how, you know, we need to pull all the resources together. And I was thinking, you know, if we just got those investments in renewable energy to that community, so little, then we could, you know, so we have to pull all the resources together. And I think maybe that is why it has taken a while to get food systems and food, you know, the agricultural sector up on the agenda of the COP, because it's very, very complex to scale it up. It's much more complex than delivering on renewable energy, because then we have the technology, we can scale it up. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not as complex as the agricultural sector. But I was so inspired to hear both Joseph Asako and the minister from Ghana, from Côte d'Ivoire, mentioning food sovereignty. And that is quite new, that we dare to address that issue. It is absolutely a scandal that Africa is not feeding its own continent, importing $56 billion US dollar worth of foodstuffs. We have the technology, we know what to do, we just need to get the investments out there. And that is what my organization, my country, is very committed to delivering on, together with IFAD, together with the African Development Bank. Really appreciate the initiatives that have come. I'm hoping to get invited to Dakar. And thank you, I will be there. And I am putting forward a strategy in Norwegian Development Assistance in just a few weeks now, focusing especially on smallholder farmers and the value chains, because we have to do it all at the same time, otherwise it's not going to work. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. That brings to an end our distinguished panel. Thank you so much. Another round of applause, please. Thank you very much. After this photo op, we'll head to the second panel. Thank you for your patience. please stay with us. We have another panel, if I can indulge in your patience a bit further. I think so. If we can kindly clear the stage so that we can begin the next panel. If we can kindly clear the stage for the next panel, ladies and gentlemen. So, if we can kindly clear the stage, we have another panel. I'd like to call forward the members of the second panel, please. If you can take your seats on the stage. So now if we can go quickly to the next panel. I know that we don't have much time. Just 15 minutes left. Please, if you could indulge us with your patience, just 15 more minutes. So the members of this panel, we have Mr. Ambroise Fayolet from the European Investment Bank. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Thank you. And from IFAD, we have Catherine Megan. She's the Associate Vice President of the General Counsel of IFAD. Catherine Megan, if she can come forward, please, for the second panel. Catherine Megan. Then we have Ms. Carol Welch. She's the Director for Strategy, Planning, and Management and Chief of Staff at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Mr. Stig Traviki, the Director of Climate and Environment for NURAD. That's the Norwegian Government Agency for Development. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. We have Mr. Jack Kane, the CEO of Intervale Geneva, joining us. Last but not least, we have Dr. Anthony Nyong, the Senior Director for the Global Center on Adaptation. Dr. Anthony Nyong. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. So this panel is very important. We'll keep it quite brief. I know that you all are pressed for time, but this panel is so important. Now that you all have heard the success stories and some of the challenges from our country partners, we need to hear from the development and donors, this community, because they are also part of the solution with trying to build Africa's food resilience. It's going to take innovative finances. It's also going to take visionary leadership. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists about proposals for the future. If you can think of something that you can propose to our African country partners, especially looking ahead of Dakar next year. So I'd like to start with the delegate from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. If you could just talk into it, I think it should be on already. Yes? No? Okay.
I think now it's on. Great. First, I'm very grateful to be here, so just to extend my thanks for the invitation. One thing that the Gates Foundation did this week was actually announce our own commitment to increase our funding for climate adaptation in agriculture over the next 4 years. So we announced a commitment of $1.4 billion over the next 4 years. 434 million of that is new and additional funding. and 2/3 of that is in the area of innovation. And so kind of looping back to the first part of the session today where we really talked about TAT and technologies for transforming agriculture, that is something that we will be investing quite heavily in. Things like new seeds that you heard about, the drought-resistant seeds, but also really looking at things like the power of big data to have sharper, more refined modeling, so you can have more accurate weather insurance, bundle services to farmers, target farmers with more appropriate advice and technology and staple crops. And the third component of our funding actually will support African voices to have stronger capacity to engage in these debates. Because Africa is so impacted by climate change, we really think it's critical that African leaders, researchers, civil society activists are empowered to really be advocating for Africa's priorities at this COP and at future COPs. So that's just a few highlights of some of the contributions we hope to make.
I like what you said about African voices. Can you speak further to that point on exactly how you're empowering these voices, and specifically which African voices, which regions?
Sure.
Thank you.
So a couple examples of new grants. We're supporting AGNIS, the African Group of Negotiators Expert Support. As we look at the COPs, you see rich countries with delegations of over 100 people, and you have African countries with 4 people in their delegations. And so AGNIS really provides targeted scientific support to delegations to help them in the negotiations. Another example is the African Adaptation Initiative that we're supporting. So those are kind of 2 recent examples of new support that we've been providing. And also PACJA, the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, so more on the civil society side. PACJA is one of our flagship investments there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to find out from IFAD, if you can just piggyback off of what she just said, supporting innovative technologies, scaling those technologies further, and again, empowering African voices. Thank you so much for mentioning that. It's very important.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. Africa is not only the breadbasket of the world. Africa can absolutely feed itself, and Africa can feed the world. Just a week and a half ago, I was in Abuja at a high-level launch of the Special Agri-Industrial Processing Zones, the SAPZ, which President Adesina mentioned, along with the President of the Islamic Development Bank. And I think that this is a model that is successful and incredibly powerful that can be scaled up across Africa. And basically what this does is bring together, like the baobab tree that we spoke about in remarks earlier, the governments, the private sector, the small-scale agri-entrepreneurs, small-scale farmers, to together create special zones for agro-industrial processing. Now, in Nigeria, for example, in 2014, we worked with one of our, this is called the 4P model, public-private producer partnerships. And the producers are the small-scale farmers. Those are the people at the center of this partnership, and they are the voices at the center. So it's basically an idea of bringing together small-scale farmers who account for more than half of the farming across Africa, which, as we all know, has vast swaths of uncultivated land. About 60% of very arable yet uncultivated land globally is in Africa. So we know the potential is here, the land is here, the youth are here. Africa has a very young, vibrant population to whom we have to help understand that agriculture is also a business, that there are opportunities to be agri-entrepreneurs. And so the 4P model, bringing together governments who create special zones in their countries where they will have land allocated to this with better tax rates as well as policies, together with the producers who are at the center. They're the small-scale farmers who IFAD supports in partnership with AFDB, Islamic Bank, and others, to be really at the center of having better models, technology, mechanization, drought-resistant seeds, small-scale irrigation, etc., and who can also band together so that instead of one small farmer, we have a large group of farmers working together with the private sector. The private sector is a critical component of the 4P model. You can have government, you can have producers, but the private sector is critical for the sustainability of agro-industrial processing in Africa. They're often the off-takers, the one who purchase the food. And by cutting out the middlemen in terms of the purchase price, having the cooperatives work directly with off-takers to purchase the food, the farmers know that they have a guaranteed buyer for their food. And the price is often determined by the farmers themselves in a cooperative model, so that they also have trust in the price. And we have also important types of technology coming together, both from partners like IFAD as well as from the private sector, on how to really bring the food up the value chain so that the farmers can get the highest price possible for their crops. This type of 4P model in special agri-industrial processing zones, or SAPZs, which has just been launched in Nigeria, is a model that I see that can absolutely scale up agro-industrial production and processing across Africa. I am confident that Africa can feed itself, and I am confident that Africa can feed the world. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I heard you mention agro-industrial processing, private sector development, and value chains. I'd like to ask if I can get Mr. Kane, the CEO of Intervale Geneva, to speak to these points as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And it was really a great pleasure to listen to you right now, indicating the role that the private sector has in this initiative. I'd like to quote President Adesina earlier. He has talked about restoring the Africa dignity. This is how I'd like to quote him. This continent since 2008 has been receiving shocks. 2008, 2009, when within 3 months, India, Thailand, Brazil put a ban on export. And you had all our heads of states writing around the world and asking for relief, for some rice to come out of the country to reach the destination. It was shocking. Again, COVID came, another shock. And again, Ukraine, Russia, another shock. And it's really a pity because we have the biggest asset of all. And I'm not the kind of person who will talk about that we have sun, we have water. No. What we need is one thing, and I apologize, I'm a private sector. The thing that we need today is to secure our markets. When you have a market, the whole value chain can be financed. Is it normal that our farmers in Africa, when they have finished producing, they don't know what is their market? Is it happening in France? Is it happening in the US with the cotton? Is it happening in Vietnam with the rice importers? No, it's not happening because these guys can produce and they have a ready market. So I think what needs to happen, and I'm so happy to see that this conference, and I quote President Adesina, this conference in end of December is not going to be just another conference. It has to be delivering on the compacts. It's about time that our governments also prepare very well the projects with economic and financial return. It's not just about begging for infrastructure. Infrastructure is a massive cost that can be financed only for projects who have their own financial profitability. So what I think is important is that the financial institution, our Africa Development Bank as a DFI in partnership with other DFIs, and I would like to difference the one like IFAD, World Bank, who are financial institutions, and making the difference with the others that are operating, helping to implement the FAO, the WFP, but also the commercial banks in country that can partner with the development partners to de-risk their financing. But ultimately, it's still about the market. I won't be too long to say that I'm a former trader. I used to send 1 million tons of rice yearly into Africa.
Why did you stop?
Because 2008, 2009 was a shock. We could not continue to do these kind of things. It's about producing. And I would say in the last 6-7 years, our journey was in the partnership with the ECOWAS Commission, with the partnership of 7-8 of the ministers and ministers of agriculture present here, to help them structure, articulate the rice value chain. But as there's progress, then are shocks coming. The minister of Ghana here, Africa Koto, has been doing a fantastic job with the PFG. Fantastic. With results that have been so impressive. And suddenly, the fertilizer crisis comes, and then 10% or 15% of the fertilizer that was supposed to come in are in country. What about the balance? So the impact is there. So let's work to absorb the shocks and to the philanthropics. I think the role is for you to help and seed, help to de-risk, to align very well with the other DFIs, so that each actor can play his role. But this has to be done around the private sector, and in the middle, at the heart of this private sector, is our smallholders, our in-growers. Commercial big farming does not work in Africa.
But you've also mentioned banks. I'd like to now invite the VP of the European Investment Banks. How can we strengthen the value chain in agricultural food systems, Africa's food systems, strengthening value chains?
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting conversation, actually. Indeed, I am a banker.
Yes, you are.
But from a public bank.
Sure.
And a public bank has a mandate that is different from a commercial bank. And our mandate is to develop and to increase and to scale up projects that help Africans in the production of food, of staples, etc. And what we have done, we are not a big bank that is present in Africa, but we have big means. And I would like to say three things. What we need to do is to scale up. What we need to do is to work more with African institutions, African financial institutions. And what we need to do is to use as much as we can, actually, to come back to your point, what we call in our jargon the blending, which is how do we mix loan resources that are at low cost but still you need to pay back, with grants and guarantees and all the instruments that allow to de-risk. And this is what we are trying to do. So let me just give you a few examples of what we do, and that is indeed for the value chain. This is also for research. I mean, there was an interesting example about seeds earlier. We finance also research for adaptation. You need to adapt to the fact that climate is changing.
But you mentioned your bank is not on ground in Africa as of yet.
No, for that we need partners. So what we do, for example, is we have signed a loan for gender and blue economy in Tanzania, 350 million euros this year, to support sectors including fisheries with a focus on gender equality. We are going to sign on Monday a big loan with IFAD, again for climate resilience, and they have the means to develop that. We have signed a big loans with financial institutions in Malawi, in Zambia, to help them finance either SMEs or farmers. So intermediate loans is also a way for us to support Africa. And finally, we finance funds because there are equity funds which are investing in Africa. And the interesting thing with funds is that you can have a high leverage. And leverage is also what we need to look at with public money. What you can hope is that you will get a lot of private financing because you have the support from the public financing. So all in all, I think what we see is that there is more financing for food in Africa. There are more financing, especially for adaptation. And the needs are big, so we need to do more. I know
Sure.
that.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to turn to our delegate from Norway, been such a huge partner for work in Africa. As your minister spoke earlier, what future partnerships can we look forward to, especially going forward as we launch our big summit in Dakar next year?
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chika, and to all the organizers of this really good event. I think it's fantastic. Yeah? We're at a COP, we have a full room, and now we're only bureaucrats speaking even, and you see, people are still here. I still see several ministers here, so thank you for being here. I think the minister from Ghana and my friend Ms. Ken here put their finger on a spot which I want to expand a little bit on, and that is how to connect the smallholder to the market. I think that is really where we need to focus our attention going forward. I think we need to stop sort of thinking that the way the African farmer farms is the problem. There has been zero investment in smallholder farmers for 150 years. So of course, without investment, there's no productivity gain. If we now start investing, there will be productivity gains. As several countries have now demonstrated, they can do it. And it's about getting finance to go where it won't yet go. And I think, as several here touched on, it's about being smart about how we de-risk. How can we, as funders, make it attractive for local banks to lend money to agripreneurs, to young people who want to create a business in a value chain where they buy at a fair price from a local farmer and create value out of the product, thereby also leading to food sovereignty and all the other good things we want to see. So this year we're going to work really hard on finding ways, together with others, to crack that nut. How do we get finance to the smallholders, to the aggregators, to the cooperatives? And I would like to launch one sort of last thought here. We've been talking about innovation. I think one area where we need more innovation is in the space of aggregation of cooperatives, the social tech of making this work well. This is where I would like to see innovation. We will try to support that. Thank you.
And that's a great segue for Dr. Anthony Young, Innovation and Coalitions. Can you just speak to this point, how to build stronger coalitions across Africa? You have the final word, sir, and then I'll hand it over to Mr. Martins Fregene to close us out. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Let me give you a few statistics. Africa contributes 3% to global emissions, accesses 3% of finance, and the private sector contributes just 3% of that. So there's something Africa loves about the number 3, you know. And then, so we've established the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, another 3, to be able to fill this gap, mobilize about $25 billion over 5 years to address issues that are important to Africa in adaptation, because we're not getting enough of that. And one of the priorities is agriculture. And we believe that in doing this, the gap there is in digital solutions. President Adesina talked about that. That's where our focus is on. How do we strengthen the use of climate-enabled digital solutions? And doing this, we can't do it alone. There's so many duplications going on. How do we identify other players working on this to be able to improve access to smallholder farmers of these technologies? So I think I'll stop here for now. That there's a lot going on the continent. Thus far, we have been able to, in 18 months of existence, we've been able to influence about 3 billion worth of adaptation initiatives on the African continent, and we can do more with stronger partnerships across the continent.
Thank you so much, Doctor. A round of applause to these esteemed panelists. This was excellent. Thank you so much for these insights. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Martins Fregene to give our closing remarks. This was such an honor. I hope that this was as insightful for you all as it was for me. Please welcome Mr. Fregene forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chika. That was a great job. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very, for me, exciting panel. I'll just run through very quickly some of the key things we heard and then make a few statements at the end. We heard from the president of the African Development Bank. He said clearly, food is the most important commodity we all eat. He also said food is a human right. The low bar for Africa is to feed itself. The high bar is to join the big granaries of the world. We heard from the honorable ministers, from the presidents, and from the Rockefeller Foundation that innovations, climate-adapted varieties, spatial solutions, we have from the VP of IFAD, of primary and secondary processing, linkage of farmers to markets, innovations. But we need to go to scale. We heard that very clearly also from the Minister of Senegal, Honorable Minister of Senegal. We have to go to scale. But we had good success stories of going to scale. Honorable Minister Owusu of Ghana told us the excellent stories, achievements there. Honorable Minister of Sierra Leone told us excellent stories from Sierra Leone. We also had Dr. Adesina talked about TAT in Ethiopia. Innovations are going to scale, and we indeed can replicate all this across the continent. But we also heard from my good friend Jack. He said we must secure the market for our farmers. Enough of African farmers having to struggle, produce, but there's no market to sell it. The Honorable Minister of Agriculture of Cote d'Ivoire said we need financing. Financing, and the Gates Foundation, thank you so much for your excellent new investments in adapting African agriculture to climate change. But I have to conclude by saying, never let a crisis go to waste. The current crisis of COVID, of climate change, of crisis in Ukraine is a strong opportunity for Africa to actually mobilize the resources, mobilize the partnerships, the technical assistance to help the smallholder farmer, as the director from NORAD said, for 150 years. Think about it. The yields, average yields of maize in Africa is the same yields of maize in the US in 1920. So he's right. For the last 100 or so years, very little effort to help the African farmer produce. But we will never let this crisis go to waste. So the AU and the bank is calling a high-level summit in Dakar, January 25th to 27th. We call it the Food Sovereignty and Resilience Summit, where we will renew the compacts, the CAADP compacts. We will renew them between government, development partners, private sector, civil society, with clear objectives and key results to drive towards self-sufficiency in food production. The most important thing was what the Rockefeller person said. We must do this in the spirit of love for our fellow human beings, for nature, and also for equity that includes food access to all. Thank you so much for coming today. I wish you a happy weekend and all the best with your trip back home. Thank you.